Oh man, that watch time spike was so good, but the high is fading. Come down's hitting me hard. It's starting to go down. No, I need more views, more likes, more comments, more watch time. YouTube, I need my next hit, man. Don't do this to me. Don't plummet me back to earth. I'm sorry I didn't make another DC video. I've forsaken the gods of the
algorithms. Math.
I'm so sorry. I know all I can do to appease you is just turn out the same stuff again and again, but I have other interests. Okay, I'm sorry I didn't do another DC video. Just put me in that sweet recommended tab, because I will always worship at the feet of
algorithms. Math. Algorithms. Math. Algorithms. Math.
Alright, many people have covered this topic, but there's a few things I don't think have been pointed out by the majority of the online review community in regards as to why Justice League became such a colossal failure. But it's not for the reasons everyone else has been saying. So strap in as we dive into one of the biggest disappointments in recent memory, whose aftermath we're still feeling to this very day, as we dig up the corpse of Superman and do a thorough autopsy to determine the cause of death for the Justice League.
Ride ain't over yet.
My man.
So the real killer for Justice League is that it's not super bad or particularly great. It is surprisingly more watchable than most of the other movies from the DCEU, with the exception of Wonder Woman. But the real killer is that it's aggressively mediocre, and there is no greater killer than being aggressively mediocre. Just look at the Solo movie. Even the people who liked it would be hard-pressed to recount any significant plot details, and probably couldn't name you any of the characters outside of Chewie, Han, and Lando. That, sadly, is what Justice League is, and given its troubled production cycle, which is now the stuff of legends, being mediocre is a near miracle. But the problem is, this was supposed to be the great payoff. This was the triumphant crossover that was supposed to validate fans for all the time and attention they paid towards the other DC films. I think there's no better comparison than looking at the signature scene where the Avengers assemble for the first time. This is a celebration. Quite literally, the score in the movie itself bursts into applause. It's a monumentous moment. So what does the Justice League equivalent look like? It's just kinda lifeless. There's no enthusiasm towards bringing any of these characters together. They're just there. When Cyborg decides to join, it's less of a celebration. It looks like a bunch of people looking to go to Applebee's. But Cyborg was all like, I don't want to go to a chain restaurant. I want to go to a real place with real food. But Wonder Woman's like, but they have the 2 for $20 deal. It's 2 entrees and an appetizer. And Cyborg's like, but I want to go out for something fancy like tapas or sushi. If you don't want to go with me, I'm going to go alone. But then he shows up anyway, and Wonder Woman gives him a smile as they all head to Applebee's to eat 2 for $20. That's what defines the Justice League, a series of mediocre compromises. There are 2 huge fundamental flaws that drag the movie from being just mediocre into something more miserable, though. The first being the fact that it was an awful idea to tease out all the Justice League members, then introduce them in a team-up movie and hope people would like them enough to see them in their own solo films. The core appeal of team-up or crossover movies is seeing 2 worlds collide, different heroes with completely separate identities and personalities cross over. It's the kind of tingly sensation you get when you have a work friend meet up with a home friend. These 2 types of people each exist in their own separate bubble, so there's a certain electricity that comes about with the idea of them crossing over and meeting. 2 worlds colliding, as 2 different people you know in separate contexts come together. Avengers was like that times 1,000, and Joss Whedon played to that perfectly. But the problem is when you're introducing new characters for the first time, you don't have that same sense of electricity. That's why the Avengers Age of Ultron felt like such a dud. In Phase 2 of the Marvel MCU, the only new characters introduced were the Guardians of the Galaxy, which left Age of Ultron to quickly introduce the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, as well as introducing Ultron, who gets created in like 5 minutes. Then introduce the Vision in the last 30 minutes of the film. It's very difficult to introduce several new characters and get the audience invested in them, compared to a character like Thor or Captain America, who each got their own origin films to get rid of all that nasty exposition. That's why when Quicksilver dies, nobody really cares, and why Age of Ultron has largely been forgotten by the mainstream film-going public. This was rectified in Infinity War, where we got to see the Guardians of the Galaxy meet up with the mainline MCU, as well as Doctor Strange thrown into the mix, plus the greater Black Panther cast, which is one of the reasons the movie feels so much more fresh and dynamic compared to Age of Ultron. So you see there, DC fanboys, I can perfectly criticize Marvel as well. But the Justice League only compounds this problem further, given the fact that half the Justice League needs to be introduced, and no, a press clip teaser package during Batman v Superman doesn't count as a formal introduction. So you have that problem, then you have the biggest problem which really sinks the film, and that's how the rebirth of Superman is handled. This is perhaps what pains me the most, because it is so goddamn easy to do. Sure, you botched everything else, you turned Superman into this miserable, self-loathing objectivist mope whose only connection to humanity was tethered to his ability to have bathroom sex with Amy Adams, and mild affection for his adopted parents who keep on telling him to forget about humanity and just do shit for himself. But everything could have been redeemed so easily. You murdered Superman, but all you have to do is just bring him back during the all is lost moment when the Justice League is getting their asses handed to them by the CGI bad guy of the week. Then bam, Superman shows up. And to the film's credit, we do get the scene, but it's everything leading up to it that makes it unbearable. And if you look at all the previous material, it's obvious that there was a version where this actually worked. At the end of Batman vs Superman, we get a teaser of dust swirling around Superman's coffin, implying that he's coming back. You have a bullshit retcon from the comics where Superman goes through a Kryptonian regeneration matrix that brings people back to life, so you could have just had him come back with that. And you also have the scene that was cut where Commissioner Gordon is clearly talking to a recently self-revived Superman before he rushes off to save the day.
You said you'd come. Now let's hope you're not too late.
Beats up the CGI bad guy, and everyone is happy. Simple, right? Well, we get that, but only after one of the most poorly constructed, convoluted second-act set pieces ever seen in a major tentpole movie. Because Batman is convinced he needs Superman to win the day, so he has the Flash and Cyborg dig up his corpse from his fucking grave. I don't care how many Pet Cemetery jokes you make, there's nothing heroic about two superheroes grave robbing and literally desiccating the corpse of Superman. This is something nobody wants to see. It's a literal visual metaphor to how poorly you've handled the most iconic character who is single-handedly responsible for creating the entire genre that is now dominating pop culture, and you are literally digging up his corpse in a vain attempt to try and revive him through some Frankenstein contraption after you murdered him both literally and metaphorically in your last movie. At least Captain America gets the courtesy of being frozen in ice. It's a good thing most kids at this point don't care about Superman, because I can't imagine some impressionable child seeing the dead corpse of Superman being dragged around and being able to walk out of the theater without streaming tears. But it gets worse. We get an overly convoluted plot device about how to revive him, where his dead body needs to go into a Kryptonian goo juice vat, then they need to throw the mother box into the goo juice, and if the Flash hits it with the lightning, maybe something will happen. It's just a bunch of the most overly convoluted bullshit nonsense that makes people hate these kind of movies. Not to mention that you have the Justice League in full costume just standing around looking ridiculous and awkward, as if praying that the person behind the camera knows what they're doing and won't embarrass them any further. It's the narrative equivalent of throwing a toaster into a bathtub filled with Jell-O and hoping it'll bring your beloved dead pet dog Sparky back to life. Because science. Even Aquaman seems embarrassed and breaks character, turning towards the audience, literally saying,
Diana's right. This is a bad idea.
Couldn't get worse from here, could it? But it does. The stupid science magic bullshit works. Superman is back, but he's evil now. Come on. Come on. You had an entire 3-hour opus where people complained that they hated evil Superman. Can't you just give us a nice Superman? Why can't Superman be nice? But seconds after you bring him back from the brink, he literally becomes an emotionless murder machine. Then, through the convoluted machinations of the plot, Cyborg shoots him for no reason, and we get Superman versus the Justice League. Because fuck Superman. Fuck you for ever liking Superman. The only way WB thinks they can make him interesting is if he's a hateful, emotionless, transhuman monstrosity ready to murder people with his bare hands. Then Batman deploys Amy Adams, and Superman remembers how much he loves having bathroom sex with her, and calms down, then runs away for the next half hour. As if that wasn't bad enough, the great MacGuffin box that the villain Steppenwolf is seeking out is left behind completely unsupervised. So as the Justice League gets their asses handed to them by their own poor decisions, the bad guy literally pops in, takes the MacGuffin they're supposed to be protecting. I can't think of a worse way to handle this. A way to make your team of superheroes come across as complete idiotic morons. It's like leaving your wallet out in the middle of a public place with a sign next to it that reads, "I have $1,000 of cash in me. Steal me." That's the kind of heroes you have in the Justice League. People who are too stupid to remember to keep their wallets in their pocket. I don't care how good the actors are, when the script makes them act like morons, it's impossible to empathize with them or root for them. Some people complain about Star-Lord rooting the battle with Thanos just as the Avengers are about to get the Infinity Glove off of him, but that decision he made was completely rooted in character and makes sense given everything we've seen him do up to this point. It's a poor but understandable choice, but the Justice League leaving the all-powerful, world-destroying MacGuffin box as they face down their poor decision of reviving Superman just makes them look like idiots. It's no wonder this film is viewed as a massive disappointment. It's watchable, but even Joss Whedon couldn't save this mess, and I don't even think releasing the Snyder Cut would make it palatable. At its best, you have a movie that's just passably mediocre, and at worst, well, you have Cyborg and Flash digging up the corpse of Superman. I don't think there's a better visual metaphor for the current state of the DCEU. But who knows, maybe Taxi Driver Joker will be decent. James Gunn is apparently going to write and direct Suicide Squad 2, and I couldn't think of a better FU to Disney and Marvel than by having the director they sacked going to their rival and turning their off-brand quirky Guardians of the Galaxy ripoff into something that's better than the real thing, as Disney struggles to find someone capable of imitating his style and tone. I can't imagine a better revenge. Who knows, maybe it'll go further than that as James Gunn becomes what Zack Snyder couldn't, to try and save the entire DCEU from itself as he starts running the entire thing and becoming the Kevin Feige of Warner Brothers. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are 3 movies on the way, and that Birds of Prey movie is apparently happening too. But at this point it feels less like a cohesive universe, but a very poor game of darts where pieces are being thrown at the board willy-nilly in hopes that something will stick eventually. But one tip for the future, if something's not working, don't just murder it and then bring it back from the dead. That's not a great way to build enthusiasm unless you want your franchise to be a literal zombie trudging along on its death march to catch up to the MCU. But before we leave this roasting of the charred and reheated corpse of Superman behind, let me add one additional thing. I think the DC Universe is a dichotomy of light and dark. It appeals to both young children and 40-year-old men. It's this pliability that has allowed it to endure for nearly a century, and it's a fine balance to walk, but it's difficult to maintain. There's a piece of writing from an unpublished Superman comic that best describes this dichotomy. The piece I'm about to present you is from an unpublished work of Agent of Batman, Max Landis' follow-up to his American Alien comic. The comic was canceled after Max Landis was accused of sexual assault last year. As of the time of this writing, no one has come out with a direct accusation, just secondhand accounts of hearing stories about him being abusive towards women. So far, he has largely retreated from the social media spotlight, only uploading to his Instagram, where he lives out his life relatively unharassed. Maybe this is the best thing for both sides. The people that hate Max Landis don't have to see his name in headlines anymore, and Max Landis himself seems to be enjoying being left alone in private, doing ghostwriting and script doctor work, because if he tried to defend himself, all he would create is a frothing frenzy of social media controversy. Until I hear greater proof of his misconduct, I will remain a fan of his work, but we're not here to talk about Max Landis. That's a much bigger discussion for another video. I'm just giving you context of where this script you're about to hear came from, and why you won't ever see it in its intended comic book form. And I think it's a great piece of writing that cuts to the core of the strengths of Batman and Superman as characters, as well as the lighter and darker sides of the DC Universe, and how there must always be a balance. Superman and the Batman have both worked wonders, with an asterisk. The issue becomes clear when you're not looking at juked stats. Juked stats? Altered statistics, you know, every police department does it. Downgrades, denies, wipes some things out here and there. That's where the difference between Batman and Superman really comes into focus. When you go to my sources inside departments, people who give me the straight up numbers on crime in Gotham and Metropolis. I thought crime was down in both cities. Well, it is and it isn't. It's a more nuanced conversation than that. People talk about the Superman effect a lot, as a psychological phenomenon. Better and better studies are coming out every day. by big brains in psychology, talking about how the experience of interacting with or even just seeing Superman affects people over the short and long term. A lot of people who've been up close and personal with the Man of Steel describe it as a profoundly moving spiritual experience. Even criminals he's put away say that they were inspired and moved just by being busted by the guy. That sounds, that's good. That isn't good? Well, it's good that his presence has taken street crime in Metropolis to a nationwide historical low, and domestic crime's even lower. One shrink I talked to said it's like how children will behave better when they're around a parent, and only get reckless when they're at school or at a friend's house. Superman is basically parenting the entire city, and add to that recidivism is at an all-time low, and hey, there's a stat that everyone likes to throw around about how Metropolis, relative to size and population, has fewer instances of supercriminality than any other city in the world, and you got your shit shined up real nice. So what's the bad part? Organized crime, it's through the roof. FBI as Metropolis is a burgeoning hub for smuggling, racketeering, money laundering, digital counterfeiting, fencing, drug trafficking, protection rackets, extortion. And that's not even counting all the white-collar stuff going on. Ponzi schemes, insider trading, identity theft, embezzlement, everything is the highest it's been in 50 years. Really? Superman's out there, he's flying around. You see him in the day, sometimes at night. Who knows where the guy lives, if he ever even takes off his costume, if he's even a human being. He brings out the best nature in people, because if you're in Metropolis and you look up, holy shit, an actual angel might just be flying by. And hey, he might just smile at you, and if you yell up, he might even just stop by and say hello. It would be like if Jesus Christ just casually moved into a third-floor walk-in in Midtown and started doing TED Talks. It's a completely new frontier psychologically. But then again, when you're alone, when you're cooking the books, or collecting a bribe, or fudging the numbers, you're indoors. You can't see the sky, so maybe Superman can't see you. After all, when's the last time you saw Superman go after someone for wire fraud? Never. Never. But these are not victimless crimes. They're just sliding in by the thousands because everyone's so busy grinning at each other, patting themselves on the back. Ooh, love thy brother Superman protects us. Did you see the selfie I got with him zooming past? Meanwhile, over 3 billion, that's billion with a B, has gone missing in the last year. Missing. Hear the quotation marks? Missing. I hadn't. I didn't think it was Superman's responsibility to. Who knows what his responsibility is, and what isn't. I can fanboy on Superman all day, but we're here for the truth, right? Right. This is all helpful to hear. Articulated, I guess. So then you flip it, right? You compare it to Gotham. Gotham says crime rates are down. Headlines, Gotham Chronicle, Gotham Gazette, all the blogs. So impressed with this Batman guy. And yeah, it's true. The mob in Gotham has been completely dismantled. The Triads, the Cosa Nostra, the Falcones, the Maronis, even the Lou Moxon Syndicate. All dunzo, deadzo, out. They're either nursing broken bones in Blackgate, extradited, or fled the city before he could get to them. These first 5 years of Batman, these guys were getting scattered like bowling pins. I remember Batman's purge of the crime families. Great writing in those stories. Vicky Vale, right? Right. Back when nobody believed the Batman existed. Before the bat signal. Before all of that. Crime went down. And then, see, that's where it gets interesting. So remember, people in Metropolis talk about having epiphanies, about feeling inspired and enlightened about Superman making this the happiest city in the country, while Gotham's organized crime has plummeted to almost nothing, but everyone's fucking miserable. Depression and anxiety are at an all-time high. Domestic and street crime are rising, and fast. People are tense and you could feel it when you walk the streets at night. It's not good, Clark. It's dystopian. I know Gotham is a costume crime problem, but I think it's a bit of an exaggeration to call it dystopian. James Gordon is a good man. So was Harvey Dent, and that's his word, not mine. Dystopia. People who encounter the Batman most often come out of it with PTSD, recurring nightmares, social isolation, vivid flashbacks, tremors. They report that in the Batman's presence they felt powerless and were certain that they were going to die. Many of the criminals he busts say they think the Batman is still watching them. He's described as a living shadow, a bulletproof monster with horns on his head. To a mob boss, that's effective, but to a mugger, trauma. It's worse, because Gotham's court system is so messed up. A criminal gets busted by Superman, he gets sentenced, he's a model prisoner, and he gets out a year later and he's a motivational speaker volunteering at a homeless shelter and working on his GED. Criminal gets busted by Batman, he gets bounced around in Gotham's horrible jail system. And a year later, that's a 20% chance the guy's killed himself. And that's a real statistic. Jesus, I had no idea. And why would you? And then there's the argument, keep in mind, I don't believe this myself, but there's the argument that Batman is instrumental in a complicity culture that creates super criminals. Oh god, the there'd be no supervillains without superheroes thing. Thanks a lot, Mr. Luthor. I know it's not real, but look at the facts. In Batman's case, they're damning. In the last 8 years, we've seen repeat incidents that would have been the story of the decade in any other decade. The Riddler, Mr. Freeze, Clayface, Scarecrow, Killer Croc, Calendar Man, Firefly. Okay, I get it. Poison Ivy, Clue Master, Clock King, Brutal, Copperhead, Mad Hatter, the Ventriloquist. I could keep going. Don't though. And what I'm saying is that in any other era other than the one we're living in right now, Victor Zsasz would be considered the most unusual and horrific serial killer of all time. These days, he doesn't even crack the top 10.
That's true, I guess.
To me, it all makes sense, right? One city is an angel, one city is a devil. In Metropolis, you fuck up, a smiling god in a cheerful costume comes in and gives you a pat on the head and sends you to seek forgiveness with a smile and a hug. In Gotham, you fuck up, Satan himself dries up from the shadows in a black tank and beats the ever-loving shit out of you, then sends you to hell. It's not a surprise one city is filled with bright-eyed, happy liars like Lex Luthor, and the other is overflowing with deranged, terrified maniacs like the Joker. If Superman had a little more Batman and Batman had a little more Superman, I mean, now that would be a whole new ballgame. And so if things are going to be better, then it'll always come down to finding the balance between the day man and the night man, so we can look towards a potentially lighter future. And with that, I leave you DC fans with a parting gift.
Day-Man, fighter of the night man, champion of the sun. You're a master of karate and friendship for everyone. Day-Man, oh, fighter of the night man, oh, champion of the sun. Oh, you're a master of karate and friendship for everyone. Of the sun. Oh, you're a master of karate and friendship for everyone. Day-Man, oh, fighter of the night man. Oh, champion of the sun. Oh, a master of karate and friendship for everyone. Day-Man,
Thanks for sticking around to watch this video, and remember, lobster's in tennis, but don't you grab it.